into new cemeteries. As a parallel act of whitewashing the memory of the events, some iconic places as prison and detention centers, infamous for being used for imprisonment and torture of political prisoners, political dissidents, have been turned into cultural centers and museums, ironically often as museums portraying political persecution, as in this case, focusing on the former regime's violence against human rights at the very same sites, using guides staging torture and other interrogation methods, performing true stories. Hyper-authenticity is used not only as means to exclude certain events from the sphere of historical knowledge, but also as a literal takeover, occupying the very boards, assigning the experience of mourning and the experience of violence, of course, I should say rather. Hyper-authenticity in this context impoverishes the image language of everyday mourning, reduces the tales of the missing into tales of truth-telling and truth-seeking. So the photos you can see here are pictures and selfies taken by the visitors of one of these museums, the Ebrat Museum, literally meaning, bad translation on my side, the Museum of the Lesson. So as you can see here, you have some examples of how it is staged, but especially how it's interpreted, what the meaning of freedom is in this case. Here they have done actually a little interesting misinterpretation. The meaning in Persian is saying freedom isn't without cost, or isn't free. In this case, isn't for free, you would say in English. They have translated it into freedom is not free, which can be a bit ironic. So the question that arises is, how does the memoryscape of the missing emerge in this context? How can it be approached and represented without being reduced to a counter-story? How can the experience of being missed be sensed, and what kind of space does it evoke in memories and in places associated with the missing? And of course, ultimately, as we discussed earlier in the previous session, how can a tale of absence be captured beyond the witness? Despite the ban, I should also say, the unmarked graveyards of the missing have been visited by those searching for them during the last 4 decades. Memories tracing the missing has marked these places, both literally in form of material traces left and erased, and as their further reenactment of the memory of the missing in the place. This talk will focus on photographic images and film sequences produced by those searching for the missing during their everyday engagement with one of these sites, the partially unmarked graveyard Khavaran, located in the outskirts of the capital, Tehran. The photographic and filmic documentation of the site has, during the last decade, been a major part of the processes of remembrance, and has mainly functioned as an act of marking the place and leaving traces rather than mere documentation. Today, I would like to firstly share a collage of visual and poetic fragments with you, based on these images, exploring the rendering of absence as present, followed by reflections on absence as trace, and further how these traces can be sensed and captured. I hope you will have patience with me, even though I had a very long introduction. I should also say that the method I have used in order to visualize the sense of absence is bricolage, as it was introduced by the anthropologist Alicia Grossman. Here understood in Michel de Certeau's sense as reframing as a form of cultural resistance, as a method to open up to other forms of understanding and gaining knowledge and be able to reinterpret certain kind of representations. In this context, where ambiguity is added by a history using hyper-authenticity as means, has impoverished the very language of mourning, other forms of representation are required in order to capture experiences of ongoing violence. Tales of absences are rarely plain stories, outspoken and clear in content, but rather emerge as traces of ambivalence, speaking in and through the gaps and in-betweens. So, through exact descriptions of the footage taken by the participants of their everyday being and engaging with the place and making a collage of the textual and the visual impressions, I've tried to open up for uncertainty as an effective dimension of the place and further see how these traces of uncertainty can evoke absence as sense. Juxtaposing and combining different visual and poetic elements aims at evoking the gaps and in-betweens embedded in the place and thereby to recall the presence of absence. So, my dears, let's go to the matter, to the actual matter. Frame 1. Fast, fast, sweeping past. The faces blurred impressions, the masks shimmering blue. Zooming in, the feet standing in the sand, side by side, enclosing, capturing the song, silent, dissonant, inquire, whispered in the wind, intertwined with the rover of the motorway, with the cars passing by this piece of desert, this chosen piece of desert, enclosed and excluded, beyond all and within reach. Frame 2. Pine cones in a circle, surrounded by golden brown weed. On one cone resting, a passport photography. Frame 3. The gravel crackles. Marble pots line the path, white shimmering in the shadow of the pines, gazing towards the desert across. On the edge of the vastness, 6 flowers in a row. In the horizon, a mirage, 2 shadows in the trembling heat, surrounded by the dried wheat. Are you going to sow wheat? Well, it's raining tonight. Frame 4. A circle of wheat. I'm here. Sunny. 25 centigrade. 21st of April, 2019. You can't run around here. You do understand that, don't you? The cousin 1 year older tries his best adult face on. It's holy ground. He tastes the words. There are graves here. The girl looks down at the desolate white sand running between her toes, in the sandals. From here, the number and the letters on the walls surrounding this huge sandbox look tiny, almost invisible. Graves, sure, she giggles. But the joy is already cloudy. Hurt, he rises on his toes. But they are here, beneath the sand. The girl starts running, with arms open, letting her airplane target grandma. Horizontal 6, vertical D sitting in the sand far away. Horizontal 6, vertical D, there they were, framed by the letters and numbers. A piece of wasteland under the burning sun, unmarked yet enclosed by walls and barbed wire. Far East, Chavaran, did those searching for the missing call it the land of the doomed, Lanat Abad, was it called in the papers handed over by the authorities, assigning the coordinates of the missing, mapping the absence. Outside the gate of the nearby cemetery, one with a name, the florist hands over small bags of shells and colorful small stones for aquariums. Dreams of the sea, hard currency in this sandy desert. The missing don't require graves. They are neither alive nor dead. Hence, in the land of the doomed, no gravestones have been allowed. In the Far East, the land of the missing, shells and colorful small stones have replaced them, engraving the soil. Visiting the site, those still searching and remembering mark the place according to the coordinates once given or hidden, creating temporary constellations using whatever it is at hand, pieces of bricks, pots, bottles, pine cones, but also colorful small stones and shells, leaving traces in the land, recalling the presence of the absent, of those absent. A battlefield of traces left and erased, traces speaking and mute, layering the place with spaces interlocking according to the rules of a high form of stereometry, between which the living and the dead can move back and forth as they like, as Vigil summarized the return of the dead. A land of in-betweens, between the deserted place and the colorful stones engraving its soil, between the visibility and invisibility of the graves, between what is no longer and what remains. The memories capture the missing in the Far East, evoking a memory place of interlocked spaces, of the living reaching out to the missing and the missing looking back, letting their gaze rest on this recognized presence of their absence. Memories tracing the missing is not only an act of memoralization, but rather enacting the memory of the missing as an experience of being missed, an experience of an entirety lacking. A memory's embodied act of searching for and leaving behind traces. To miss is an extension of the being as being with the other. The living's engraving of the soil is a marking of the missing, not as dead, but rather as living on living, as Heidegger designated the other, as those no longer here, but still present in their absence, as a being that still remains. The authorities handing out the coordinates is an act of materializing the absence of the missing as a suspension from history, of depriving the name, yet letting the remains remain as deserted. Memories tracing the missing in the place captures them in the gaps, in the ambivalences the colorful stones add to the place. The stone's tale is rather a tale of the uncanny, a tale mute for some, speaking to others, a tale of the stones not belonging in the place, but also a tale of the vanishing color exposed to the sun and nature, a materiality vanishing while speaking and speaking through its vanishing. Engraving is carving oneself into the place. It is an extension of the being, of the living, into a being with the other. Engraving is evoking a space within the place, with walls of colorful stones and their ongoing vanishing. By engraving not a grave with a name, but through leaving a trace of ambivalence, of something explicit and unspoken, the space of the memories appears in the movement in between the struggle on representation, the embodiment of the memory in the place and the ambiguity added to the place by the stones, by a set of flowers in a row, by a circle of cones. The stone's tale is a tale of remains still remaining, with or without names, of the afterness in what still remains, of reclaiming the absence and bringing its presence to the fore, and by doing so, suspending the suspension. A tale of living a history embodied in non-closures, in the ambiguities constantly added and erased. In between this is a state of memory, by juxtaposing items taken out of their previous context yet aligned in new montage. Remembrance underlines the gaps and ambivalences. It confirms and disclaims in one, offers associative pathways rather than answers. Regarding our previous discussion, I would hope that we can continue that discussion, what memories actually do. Remembering is a process of collecting and recollecting, of arranging ever new constellation with the new findings, of returns to the same fragment again and again in memory, in a place, in an image. Placing the experience between the concreteness of the wasteland and the muteness of the stones, memories witness history and underline in its urgency, and at the same time add a trace of ambiguity, letting the tale of the ongoing violence, the tale of the impossibility of a tale, speak through a trace of ambiguity. Memories roaming in the gaps between the has-been and the ongoing, the tangibility of a montage and the vanishing of a trace, emerges in the lived experience of remembrance and awareness of the state of in-betweenness in memory and its constant movement. Memory's tracing, searching and living traces embodies a shimmering go-between, as Marcesa Cavalcante-Schubach points out, an experience of the meanwhile and in-between, which refuses historical closure, but rather aims at the fragility and intensity of the experience of the movement in between. The position of in-betweenness in memory is revisiting the Far East, appears not as a state of in-between one representation or the other, past or present, rather as an ongoing space-making process between different modes and layers of memory, between its experience of an ongoing vanishing and the still remaining, embodying an endeavor to keep the deserted wasteland as wasteland not deserted, as a room for those absent present. And now, to conclude, and thank you for your patience. I know it's not entirely maybe easy just to listen to it. Let us go back and see what kind of tale the camera told. The camera records a wasteland as any, a wasteland as none. A circle of pine cones, 6 flowers in a row, wheat, sown and gone. It zooms in, feet standing in the sand, faces gone, sand marked by the colorful stones, and stones scattered around. The camera records, memories walking, memories marking, moving through a wasteland, week after week, year after year. A land deserted yet marked, a land emerging in between a song whispered and the roar of a motorway. A land in between the momentariness of a circle of pine cones and the insistence of a circle of feet standing in the sand. The camera captures the repetitive everydayness of the remembrance as ongoing, rendering the ordinary as recognized, yes, yet unfamiliar, concrete, yet ambiguous. telling the story of an event, absent yet present, explicit yet silent, the continuous life of the event as missing and as ongoing. The afterlife of the event does not refer to an afterlife in the sense of another life beyond this one, points Maryam Adjam out, but should be understood as a continued life, the past that becomes actual in the present, or the past that haunts the present. It denotes the multi-layered dynamics of presence and absence, anticipation and retrospection, past and present. Hence, the very act of repetition, of the constant appearing and reappearing of an event as the missing in the gaps between the seemingly obvious and the infinite amount of its variations, between the gaze of the camera capturing a wasteland not deserted and a wasteland as any, between traces witnessing and vanishing, tells the story of the afterlife of the event as its continuous life. It captures a sense of an absence as present, rather than telling a story of factualities and authenticities. The camera marks, I'm here, sunny, 25 centigrades, and it captures a face turned away. Incorporating the missing as absent yet present into the place and thereby into the body of the community, the repetitive act of marking the place and being there, the documenting of this marking of the place and being there, transforms the dead other into living memory, as Levinas described memory, the memory work of the dead. It requires a response to the ongoing presence of the other. Hence, the death of the other emerges as the death entrusted to be remembered, as a responsibility, as an ongoing memory tracing the present absent of the missing, and hence pointing out the ongoingness of those absent, the living of the unliving through the very body of those living, through their being there. I'm here, I see you, you're seen through me and with me, a life with and through the other, a precarious life, yet a continued life. The act of memory is not merely an afterlife of an event and its continuous life. The camera records, the bodies become walking memorials, the stones, the cones, monuments, in and through their vanishing, evoking an afterlife, evoking an affective memoryscape between which the living and the dead can move back and forth as they like. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you. Do we have any reflections, questions?
Thank you very much for your beautiful presentation. I was thinking that this is another temporality, like the one we were talking about in the previous session, because it's more like the ephemeral nature of human life, like the time of wisdom. And I was thinking about Antigone. The act of memory as an act of resistance, but also a kind of resistance that is different from the kind that we were talking about, the genocide, because it's a death within the family, so to speak. It's an inconvenient